my channel. I hope you're doing well. So today I'm going to be talking about vermicomposting. So before we start, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to what is vermicomposting. So we've all heard about composting, right? Which is to break down food so that you can let food break down so you can then use it as a fertilizer. Well, vermicomposting is essentially the same thing, but you use worms to do the process. So first, before I explain a bit more vermicomposting and how you can do it at home, I want to talk about why it's important. So in developed countries and developing countries, we waste about 1/3 of the food we eat. So in developing countries, it's more so at the production level that a lot of food waste is generated, whereas in developed countries, it's more so at the consumption level. So in our kitchen, but also in supermarkets, when fruits and vegetables are deemed to be ugly and they're often tossed. And I've also worked on a farm, and a lot of times there's some pre-processing that happens there where you kind of pick the nicest looking vegetables because those are the ones that are going to sell better. And I just want to say that I use the terms developed and developing just for the sake of this example explanation. I know those are a bit outdated, but you know what I'm referring to when I say those. Okay, so my cat is running around. It's gonna be hard to focus. What was I gonna say? Yes, the problem with food waste is a lot of times it ends up in landfill. So it just sits there and it releases greenhouse gases such as CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide, which contribute to global warming, but also it can cause some pollution, like it can leach into, let's say there's groundwater below and the landfill is not well managed, then you can have some of that pollute the groundwater. It can also go into streams and cause eutrophication and algal blooms. And so instead of having that waste just sit there and pollute, we could essentially use that food waste, because that food waste is rich in nutrients and nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and then other more micro nutrients such as calcium, magnesium, sulfur, zinc. There's a lot of nutrients that plants need to grow. And in agriculture, we use a lot of inorganic fertilizers. So inorganic meaning they've been synthesized in the lab. And a lot of times these can have detrimental effects on the soil and on microbial communities in the soil. And also with a nutrient like phosphorus, it can be extracted in nature in phosphorus mines. However, oh my god, my cats are going crazy, I'm sorry. However, this phosphorus that can be extracted in a mine, it's finite. It's a finite resource. There's not an unlimited supply of it. I interrupted the video for a second because my cats were going nuts and running everywhere. But yeah, I talked about the phosphorus and other nutrients being limited. However, if you think about it another way, it's not, because you have all this food, like I was saying, that's just wasting away in landfill, but it contains all these nutrients that I listed. So what you can do is repurpose, revalue those nutrients, and that's the main concept behind the circular economy, which I made a video about. You can look for it. I'll link it down below in the description. And you can use things such as composting, aerobic digestion. There's other techniques, but those are the main ones. And vermicomposting, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. And I think vermicomposting is especially manageable in an apartment setting, a home setting, because unless you have a backyard where you can do your own composting, it's gonna be kind of difficult to do it inside, because you really have to be precise about how you manage it, mix it, the different ratios of food, so it doesn't start smelling when it comes to regular composting. However, vermicompost is a little less tricky, and you have the worms that help speed up the process, as well as kind of minimize the odors, and it's just its own little community. As in compost, there's microbes breaking down the matter in vermicompost, but the worms, the earthworms, they introduce even more microbes from their gut, and so they serve as inoculants, and that's partly what will speed up the process and help manage it more easily. Now that I've given an introduction to revaluing food waste and vermicompost and compost, I'm going to be talking about the nitty-gritty of what you need in order to start your own vermicomposter. So first, what kind of worm do you have to use? Well, you want an earthworm, not a parasitic worm, but exactly what type of earthworm? You want an epigeic worm, which means it's the group of worms that lives on the surface of the soil and in the litter. And they naturally will help break down organic matter and interact with other insects and fauna within the top layer of the soil. The worm that I use, so the specific species of worm that I use, is commonly known as the red wiggler. Its scientific name being Eisenia fetida. And you can find worms for composting online. There are different websites. There's also Facebook groups and local communities that will provide worms for people that are interested in starting their own vermicomposter. I know in Montreal there's this association called Ecoquartier, and within each borough, they have programs where they give worms or sell worms at a discounted price for people that are interested in starting their own vermicomposter, because this association in particular wants to foster sustainability and learning around science, and that's why they have this initiative. I got my worms from a friend, so that's also another thing. If you have a friend that has a vermicomposter, eventually the worms are going to reproduce so much that there's going to be too many of them, and then you have to start another vermicomposter, and that's a good opportunity to give some of your worms to someone else who wants to start their own colony. Now we're going to talk about food waste. My cat is by my side. I'm petting him. I'm hoping he's going to stay calm because this has been very hard to film. Anyways, so there's actually quite a lot of food waste that you can feed your worms. However, there are some restrictions, and I'm just going to go ahead with telling you what you cannot feed your worms because the list is shorter. So you cannot feed your worms any meat product. So no meat, but also no meat bones, no meat fat. Another thing you cannot feed them is onions and garlic because according to the literature, they have a hard time breaking it down. Then you cannot feed them citrusy fruits. So no lemon, lime, oranges, clementines, etc. because that is too acidic for them and they do not do well in an acidic setting. On the other hand, you could feed them pretty much any kind of vegetable or fruit, besides the citrusy fruit. And you can feed them bread and pasta, although I would maybe avoid the more processed foods at the beginning, like bread and pasta, because that might be a bit harder for them to process, so I would stick mostly to vegetables and fruits. You can also give them eggshells. Actually, if you start noticing that they seem unhappy, you see them crawling out, or there's some kind of mold growing, or there's some mites. So mites you would recognize them, there'd be little brown dots and they'd be crawling all over. It's normal to have some because you want to promote some kind of diverse ecosystem. However, if you have an infestation, it's not too great because they'll eat all the food. Well, a lot of times these are indicators of acidity. So you can use crushed eggshells to make your worm bin less acidic. And if you can also give them coffee grounds, which them tend to be acidic, but you can then balance that out with eggshells. So now we're going to talk about the contents of the bin. So first, at the bottom, you want some kind of drainage system. There's a lot of moisture that accumulates from all those fruits and vegetables breaking down because they contain a lot of water. So you want to make a lot of holes at the bottom of your bin, and below it you want to put either another bin or a tray, something to collect some of the moisture. So I use a layer of coconut coir to help with the drainage. However, it would probably be better if I had a layer of rocks and then a layer of sand. However, at the moment, I do not have those materials. They are in the lab. I was gonna build a better version of the bin I have at home, but I cannot go to the lab right now with what's happening in the world right now. Then on top of your drainage layer, you're gonna have the bedding. And the bedding, I am using some soil. I'll show you in the clips what this all looks like and explain what kind of soil I'm using. As you can see here, I've poked holes all over my lid, and that's because obviously you want oxygen to flow through. Additionally, I've drilled holes on the side, as you can see here. So the way it works is at the top, you have some kind of bulking agent, something that's going to absorb moisture, because a lot of moisture is produced. Obviously, you have soil, you have decomposing matter, and worms really like moisture. But you don't want there to be too much moisture. So one way of doing that is by putting some kind of newspaper or cardboard, something that's going to absorb that moisture. Okay, I'm gonna go in here with my glove and show you. So then you have the bedding. I don't have a lot of food in here because they had too much of it and it was growing in molds, but basically you would have soil. So when you're buying your soil, you want to make sure it's loamy soil, meaning it's not acidic, it's more basic, so it's a higher pH. And this would be typically where, well, my worms are hiding here, but this is where you'd have your worms burrowing, and you have your food. You would bury your food under the soil, and then at the oh, look, we got a worm. There we go. It's a red wiggler. It's cute. They prefer to be away from sunlight. Okay, that's why they burrow. So at the bottom, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see. I don't think so, but basically this layer at the bottom is coconut coir. You can get this in any gardening store or greenhouse. And that's to help drain excessive moisture that would accumulate at the bottom. So the soil / bedding is where the worms are gonna burrow and, you know, do their thing. And that's, you would put the food waste on top of the bedding and bury it a little bit below. Very important to check on your bin every single day. Check on your worms. If there's a lot less, that could be a bad sign. You could have underfed them, overfed them. The rule of thumb is they can eat about 1/2 of their weight. When you buy your worms, you buy per pound or per kilogram, so you know exactly how many you have. I don't. Like I said, I was gonna do an experiment with my worms. Don't worry, they would be safe. But anyways, I could explain what I was gonna be doing my master's lab work on, but that's beside the point right now. But what I was gonna say is I would have weighed how many worms I had to be precise, but since I'm doing it at home and my friend just gave me his worms, I don't really know. But if you know, let's say that you buy 400 grams of worms, you know you can give them 200 grams of food every day maximum. I feed them every other day because I have a tendency to overfeed them, so I give them time to eat it all. So these are the basics of vermicomposting. If you have questions, you can ask them in the comment section. I will be happy to answer. I can make another video about this as well with more information, maybe more about like the research behind vermicomposting, comparing it to compost. It all depends on what you're interested in. Tell me what you'd like to learn more about, and I hope you learned a little bit about vermicomposting today and are inspired to maybe start your own vermicompost. Thank you. Bye. See you in the next video, guys.